I saw a kid playing alone at the park and asked him, "Can I throw the ball with you?" "Sure, my name is Junior," he exclaimed and tossed me the ball. That's when a woman behind us screamed. She grabbed her two toddlers and literally ran to the parking lot. "I should go," he mumbled. But before I could ask why, 3 more parents were speed-walking toward us. My dad grabbed my arm and yanked me towards the parking lot. "We just moved here and this is what you do." I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Junior turned back once and mouthed, "Thank you," before disappearing down the path. Can someone please tell me what just happened? Everyone just stared at me like I'd been playing catch with a live grenade. When I got back home, my aunt and uncle were already waiting at the door. My aunt's face was blotchy like she'd been crying. We heard everything. My aunt grabbed my hands and dragged me to the kitchen sink. "Wash. Now. Use the special soap." "Special soap? For playing catch?" My uncle stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Those clothes get burned. And you're sleeping in the guest room tonight, away from everyone." My aunt's voice was shaking. "On your first week here, what will the neighbors think? Are you people insane? He's just a kid." My uncle slammed his hand on the counter so hard the dishes rattled. "You don't understand this town. That boy, his family." He stopped himself, jaw clenched. "Just stay away from him. They took my phone, my laptop, everything. Until you understand the rules," my aunt said through the door. I could hear them on the phone downstairs, voices urgent and scared. I caught fragments, exposure, protocols. The next morning at school was worse. The principal was waiting at the entrance and pulled me straight to his office. Everyone in the hallway stepped back as I passed, whispering behind their hands. Girls I'd talked to yesterday literally pressed themselves against lockers to avoid touching me. "You have a reputation to uphold," the principal said, sliding a paper across his desk. "Stick to spending time with people more. Safe. Pure. Remember, birds of a feather flock together." At lunch, I sat down at my usual table, and everyone immediately got up and left. It felt like everyone was playing some cruel prank on me. In math class, Junior sat 2 rows ahead of me completely alone. When Miss Steph asked if anyone had a question, his hand was raised for 5 straight minutes. She looked right past his arm 3 times. Finally, when no one else could solve the equation, she picked Junior, and he gave the correct answer immediately. She sighed and said, "That's right," before rolling her eyes. At lunch, I watched my crush Ashley walk around the cafeteria handing out bright pink birthday invitations. When she realized she gave one to Junior, she literally ran back and snatched it away. "Sorry, I miscounted," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I only have enough for people like me." She walked past my table without even looking at me. Junior just stared at his food and kept eating like nothing happened. So I did what any kid would do in that situation. I followed him home. He was a block away from his house when an old man came out and stood on his porch, arms crossed, just watching. A woman across the street was on her phone, speaking urgently while staring at Junior. "Yes, he's walking down Bird Street again. About 11 years old. There's another one with him," she added, looking directly at me. "The new boy." When we finally reached his house, there was a police car parked across the street. The officer looked up from his computer, saw Junior, and immediately got on his radio. Junior put his hands in the air like it was routine, and spoke more politely than I'd ever heard an 11-year-old talk. The officer stared at me. "You live around here?" I shook my head. "Then move along. Now." That night, my cousin was on FaceTime with her boyfriend, and I heard her say Junior's name, and then my name. My mom says we might have to move because of what Mason did. The second I walked in, she frantically hung up. "Were you talking about Junior?" She tried to push past me to leave. "Move, freak!" I blocked the door. "Tell me what's wrong with him, or I'm texting your boyfriend that you stuff your bra with orange peels." Her face went white. "That's blackmail. I've lost everything because of whatever this is." She looked around frantically, then grabbed my arm and pulled me further into her room. "If I tell you, you can never say I'm the one who told you." "Fine." She was actually shaking. "Mason, he's black." I stared at her blankly. "So are we?" "What the—" "It's different," she responded with a straight face. "We're light-skinned. He's full." As soon as she left, I messaged Junior from my cousin's laptop. "Want to hang out tomorrow?" He replied instantly, and the next day we actually had fun. Until my phone started blowing up with texts and missed calls, all angry that I was spending time with my friend. I got home around 5 p.m. and went straight to my room, ignoring my aunt's questions about where I'd been. My phone kept buzzing with angry messages, but I turned it face down on my desk and tried to do homework. Around 8 p.m., I heard my cousin's footsteps in the hallway. She walked past my door once, then again 2 minutes later, then a third time like she was checking if I was still alive or something. My phone buzzed and I grabbed it fast. Junior had replied to my message. He said he'd love to hang out tomorrow and asked where I wanted to meet. My hands were shaking a little as I typed back that we should meet at the basketball courts near his house at noon. He sent back a thumbs up emoji, and I actually smiled for the first time all day. My cousin's shadow appeared under my door again, and I shoved my phone under my pillow. The next morning, my aunt was waiting for me in the kitchen with a list of chores. She handed me a rag and pointed at the windows, then the baseboards, then the bathroom tiles. I finished everything in 40 minutes, working fast because I knew what she was doing. When I tried to leave, she invented more tasks, but I was already putting on my shoes. My dad came downstairs and asked where I was going. I looked right at him and told him the truth because I was done lying about Junior. He glanced at my aunt and she shook her head really slowly, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Neither of them actually moved to stop me, though. My dad just sighed and went back upstairs while my aunt turned away and started washing dishes that were already clean. I walked to the basketball courts and saw Junior already there shooting free throws by himself. The park was completely empty, even though it was perfect weather, sunny and warm with a light breeze. We started playing one-on-one and he was actually really good, way better than me. He could dribble behind his back and make shots from the three-point line while I was still figuring out how to do a layup without tripping. For about 20 minutes, it felt totally normal. Just two kids playing basketball and talking about nothing important. Then I noticed the same police car from yesterday parked across the street with the engine running. The officer was just sitting there watching us through his windshield. Junior caught me staring at the cop car and shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. He kept dribbling while he talked. The police followed him to the school every morning, he said. They sat outside his house during dinner. They drove past whenever he was outside playing or walking or just existing. His voice didn't change at all when he explained this, like he was telling me about the weather or what he ate for breakfast. I asked if they ever actually did anything, and he said sometimes they made him go home for no reason, or they asked him questions about where he was going even when it was obvious. He'd learned to just be polite and answer everything they asked because arguing made things worse. My phone started going crazy around 12:30. Text after text after text from my cousin, my aunt, my uncle. They weren't asking where I was because someone had clearly already told them. The messages got more and more urgent with each one. My cousin sent 3 in a row saying, "Get home now." My aunt sent one saying I was making this worse for everyone. My uncle's message just said the Hendersons saw you, and somehow that felt like the scariest one, even though I didn't know who the Hendersons were. I tried to ignore my phone, but it kept buzzing in my pocket like an angry bee. Junior noticed me staring at my phone screen and asked if I needed to go. I shoved the phone deep in my pocket and told him no, I was staying. We kept playing basketball, but now everything felt different. I was suddenly aware of every single car that drove past us, every person who walked by and stared, every curtain that moved in the windows of nearby houses. There was a man washing his car 2 houses down who kept glancing over at us. A woman walking her dog crossed to the other side of the street when she got close. Junior didn't seem to notice any of it, but I couldn't stop noticing. Around 1 p.m., a woman came out of her house and stood on her porch with her arms crossed. She just watched us without saying anything. Junior waved at her politely and called out good afternoon, but she didn't wave back. She went inside and I thought maybe that was the end of it. 5 minutes later, a different police car pulled up, not the same one that had been watching us before. This officer actually got out and walked over to us. He asked what we were doing like it wasn't completely obvious that we were playing basketball in a public park with a basketball. Junior went into this different mode I'd never seen before. He called the officer sir and explained very politely that we were just playing basketball and we'd be leaving soon. His whole body language changed, hands visible, shoulders down, voice respectful. The officer looked at me and asked if my parents knew where I was. I said yes, even though I wasn't totally sure that's what he was really asking. He seemed like he was asking something else underneath the actual question. The officer told us to keep it down, even though we'd barely been talking and definitely weren't being loud. Then he walked back to his car and just sat there for another 10 minutes watching us. Junior said this was actually a good day, because sometimes they made him go home for no reason at all. I was starting to understand why that woman at the park yesterday had literally grabbed her kids and ran to the parking lot. She wasn't scared of Junior. She was scared of being near Junior when the police showed up. We played until 2 p.m. when Junior said he needed to get home before his mom started worrying. I offered to walk with him, and he hesitated for a second, looking at me like he was trying to figure out if I really meant it. Then he nodded. The walk to his house took 12 minutes, and I counted 4 different people who stopped what they were doing to watch us pass. An old man watering his lawn turned off his hose. A woman getting her mail stood frozen on her porch. 2 teenagers on bikes slowed down and stared. A guy working on his car stood up and watched us until we turned the corner. Nobody said anything, but everybody looked. When we got to Junior's door, I told him I'd see him at the school, and he nodded before going inside. I walked back toward my house, checking my phone every few seconds as more messages piled up. My aunt sent 3 texts in a row with just question marks. My uncle sent one that said, "Home now," in all caps. My cousin's message said, "You're so dead," with a skull emoji. I got home at 2:30, and the second I opened the door, I knew something was really wrong. My entire family was sitting in the living room like they'd been waiting for hours. My aunt's eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying for a while. My uncle was standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed and his jaw so tight I could see the muscles. My dad was sitting on the couch looking at his hands. My cousin was on the stairs, and when she saw me, she looked down at her feet really fast. Nobody said anything for like 10 seconds, and the silence made my skin feel weird. Then I noticed my aunt's phone was face up on the coffee table, and I could see a group chat with a bunch of names I didn't know. My uncle opened his mouth to say something, but my dad held up his hand, and my uncle actually stopped. Dad looked at me, and his voice was quiet when he asked why I was doing this. He wanted to know what I thought I was proving by spending time with Junior. I told him Junior was my friend, and I still didn't understand what was wrong with that. My uncle made this angry sound and started talking really loud about disrespect and how I was making the family look bad. He said something about safety and reputation and how I didn't understand what I was doing to them. My dad held his hand up again and my uncle stopped, but I could tell he wanted to keep yelling. My aunt picked up her phone and her hands were shaking when she turned it toward me. She showed me a group chat called Meadowbrook Parents, and there were at least 15 messages about me from just today. Someone named Patricia wrote, "The new family needs to get control of their son before he contaminates the other children." Another parent said I was clearly troubled and needed intervention before it's too late. Someone else wrote, "I saw him walking with that boy through the neighborhood like it was completely normal." The word contaminate made my stomach hurt in a way I'd never felt before. My aunt was crying again and she kept saying, "What will people think?" over and over. My dad reached out and took my phone from my hand, and this time he looked sad instead of angry. He said he was trying to protect me from making my life harder than it had to be. My aunt wiped her eyes and said the town had rules that existed long before we moved here, and if we tried to fight them, it would only hurt our family. She said some families had lived here for generations, and they had ways of doing things. My uncle added that I was making everything harder for my cousin too, because her friends were asking questions. My cousin looked up from the stairs and her face was red. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say that would make any of this make sense. My dad put my phone in his pocket and told me to go to my room. I went upstairs and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling until it got dark outside. I could hear them talking downstairs for hours, but I couldn't make out the words. That whole weekend felt like being in jail. My aunt barely looked at me. My uncle didn't talk to me at all. My cousin stayed in her room. My dad brought me food but didn't stay to eat with me. On Monday morning, I got ready for school and nobody said anything at breakfast. The ride to the school was completely silent. When I got to first period, I'd only been sitting there for like 10 minutes when the intercom called my name. The teacher told me to go to the guidance office and everyone in class turned to stare at me. I walked through the empty hallways and found the guidance office near the front entrance. The secretary told me to sit and wait, so I sat in one of those plastic chairs that are always too small. After a few minutes, a woman came out and smiled really big and said, "Mason, come on in." She introduced herself as Mrs. Kelly Merritt, and her voice had that fake sweet sound that adults use when they're trying to trick you into something. Her office was small and smelled like vanilla candles. She sat in her chair and rolled it way too close to me so our knees were almost touching. She asked how I was adjusting to the community, and if I was making friends with appropriate peers. The way she said appropriate made it sound like some kids were appropriate and some weren't. I asked what made a peer appropriate, and her smile got tighter like her face was a rubber band being stretched. She said she meant students with similar backgrounds and goals. She suggested I join the robotics club or the debate team where I could meet people like that. I told her Junior was in my math class and we had the same background. Mrs. Merritt's smile stayed on her face, but her eyes changed. She said that's not quite what she meant. Then she pulled out a folder with my name on it and opened it to show my class schedule. She said she'd been thinking about my socialization options, and maybe I should switch to the later lunch period. She said it would give me more options for meeting different people. I realized right then that she was trying to separate me from Junior, without actually saying Junior's name. I told her my lunch period was fine and I didn't want to switch. Mrs. Merritt closed the folder and her voice changed a little. She started talking about my future and opportunities and college applications. She said the associations we make in middle school can follow us for years. The way she said associations made it sound like a disease you could catch. She said scholarships and programs look at the whole student, including who they spend time with. I looked right at her and asked if she was telling me not to be friends with Junior because his skin was darker than mine. Her face went completely blank for a second, like I'd said something in a different language. Then she stood up really fast and said she needed to wrap up our meeting. She said she'd follow up with me later this week and opened her office door. I walked out and saw Junior sitting in a chair outside the principal's office. He gave me a small nod and I nodded back. The principal's secretary was sitting at her desk typing on her computer, and she looked right past Junior like he wasn't even there. He was sitting maybe 3 feet away from her, and she was pretending he didn't exist. I wanted to say something to Junior, but a teacher was walking past, so I just kept going. At lunch, I grabbed my tray and walked to the table where I'd been sitting last week with some kids from my English class. I sat down and started opening my milk, and every single person at the table picked up their trays and moved to a different table. They didn't say anything or look at me. They just left. Ashley walked past my table carrying her lunch, and I tried to make eye contact, but she looked straight ahead like I was invisible. I ended up sitting alone at the end of a long table, while people at the other tables whispered and pointed at me. I could see Junior sitting by himself on the opposite side of the cafeteria like always. I thought about walking over there and sitting with him, but I was scared it would make things worse for both of us. Some kid walked past and said contaminated under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear. I ate my lunch as fast as I could and left the cafeteria early. The next day at lunch, I grabbed my tray and headed to the cafeteria. Junior was sitting by himself on the far side of the room at a table meant for 8 people. I looked at the empty chairs around him and thought about walking over there, but then I remembered yesterday and how everyone treated me. If I sat with him now, would it make things worse for both of us? Would the teacher start watching him even more? I stayed where I was and sat down alone at a different table. Kids walked past me carrying their lunches and not one of them made eye contact. Ashley went by with her friends, and they were all laughing about something, and when they saw me, they got quiet until they passed. I ate my sandwich and kept my head down. Then I saw Aiden coming toward my table with his tray. He slowed down when he got close, like he was thinking about sitting, and for a second I thought he actually would. But he kept walking and sat 2 tables away. At least he looked at me, though. At least he didn't pretend I was invisible like everyone else did. After school, I finally got my phone back from my dad and checked my messages. There were like 15 texts from my friends back home asking why I wasn't posting anymore and if everything was okay. Marcus wanted to know if I was coming back to visit soon. Deja sent me a funny video and said she missed me. They had no idea what was happening here. I wanted to tell them about Junior and the police car and how my whole family was acting crazy. But how do you even explain something like that in a text? I typed out 3 different messages and deleted all of them. Finally, I just wrote back that I was busy getting used to the new school, and I'd call them soon. It felt like lying, but I didn't know what else to say. That night, I was in my room doing homework when my cousin knocked on my door. I told her to go away, but she came in anyway and closed the door behind her. She looked nervous and kept messing with her hair. She said she wanted to apologize for tracking my location the other day. I asked her why she did it, and she said her mom made her turn on the family sharing thing on her phone. She said the whole family was under scrutiny now because of what I did. Then she told me her boyfriend's parents were asking questions about me, and his mom suggested they take a break until things settled down. Her voice got shaky when she said it, and I could tell she'd been crying. She said his mom didn't want him around anyone who associated with people like Junior. I asked what she meant by people like Junior, and my cousin just shook her head. I looked right at her and asked if she really believed Junior was different from us just because his skin was darker. She wouldn't look at me. She said it wasn't about what she believed, it was about what everyone else believed. I told her that was a stupid reason to treat someone badly. She got defensive and said I didn't understand how things worked here. She said this town had rules and everyone followed them and I couldn't just show up and change everything. Then she said something that I kept thinking about later. She said, "You can't change this town, Mason. You can only survive it." She left before I could argue with her, and I heard her door slam down the hall. On Saturday morning, I woke up early and decided to go to Junior's house. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just left a note saying I'd be back later and walked out before my aunt could ask questions. Junior's house was about 15 minutes away, and I kept checking behind me to see if anyone was following. When I got there, I stood on the porch for a minute before knocking. A woman answered the door and I knew right away it was Junior's mom. She had the same eyes as him. She looked at my face for a long time, like she was trying to figure out if I was safe or dangerous. Then she smiled a little and told me to come in. Their house was really normal inside. There were family photos on the walls and the kitchen smelled like cookies baking. It wasn't what I expected after the way everyone talked about them. Junior's mom said her name was Zara, and she brought me a plate of cookies that were still warm. She asked about my family and where we moved from and how I was liking the new school. The questions seemed normal, but I could tell she was really asking something else, like she was trying to figure out why I wanted to be Junior's friend. Junior came downstairs in his pajamas and looked surprised to see me sitting in his living room. Zara told us we could hang out, but we had to stay where she could see us. She said it in a nice way, but I understood what she meant. She was protecting Junior from anyone who might say something bad happened. We sat on the couch and Junior turned on his video game system. For a while we just played and didn't talk about school or the town or any of the hard stuff. It felt good to just be normal kids playing video games. We were in the middle of a race when my phone started ringing. It was my dad. I looked at Zara and she could see the panic on my face. Before I could answer, she walked over and held out her hand for my phone. I gave it to her and she answered it herself. She said hello and introduced herself really calmly while my dad's voice got louder and louder through the speaker. I could hear him asking where I was and demanding I come home right now. Zara didn't get upset. She just said I was welcome in her home and she would make sure I got back safely. Then she handed the phone back to me. My dad was still yelling when I put the phone to my ear. He said I was grounded and I needed to come home immediately. He said I was being disrespectful and making everything worse for our family. Zara looked at me and mouthed that it was okay. She nodded toward the door, giving me permission to leave if I needed to. But Junior was sitting there on the couch looking hopeful, like he really wanted me to stay. I took a breath and told my dad I'd be home in an hour. Then I hung up before he could say anything else. Junior smiled and handed me the game controller. Around 3 o'clock, Zara said she needed to run to the corner store and asked if we wanted to come with her. Junior's whole body went tense. He suggested we just stay home and keep playing. But Zara said she wouldn't be long and we should come along. I didn't understand why a quick trip to the store was such a big deal. Junior got up slowly and put his shoes on, and I followed them out to the car. The drive only took 5 minutes, but Junior sat completely still the whole time with his hands in his lap. When we pulled into the parking lot, I finally understood why he didn't want to come. The clerk behind the counter looked up when we walked in, and his eyes went straight to Junior. He came out from behind the register and started following us down the aisles. He didn't even pretend he was doing something else. He just walked behind Junior, watching everything he did. Zara was looking at the bread, and the clerk stood at the end of the aisle staring at Junior like he was about to steal something. Junior kept his hands where the clerk could see them the whole time. He didn't put his hands in his pockets or touch anything on the shelves unless he was planning to buy it. When Zara went to pay, the clerk held up each bill to the light and checked it like he thought the money was fake. Junior acted like none of this was happening. He just stood there quietly waiting for his mom to finish. But I saw it all, and I couldn't believe this was normal for them. We walked back to the car and nobody said anything about what just happened, because I guess when something happens every single day, there's nothing left to say about it. We were halfway back to Junior's house when I noticed the police car. It wasn't parked this time. It was moving right next to us on the street, going exactly as fast as we were walking. The officer inside didn't look at us directly, but I could see him watching through the window. Zara put her hand on Junior's shoulder and kept it there. Junior's face didn't change at all, but his jaw was tight like he was clenching his teeth. We walked another block and the car stayed right beside us. People on their porches stopped what they were doing to stare. A woman watering her lawn turned off the hose and pulled out her phone. We turned the corner and the police car turned too, still matching our speed exactly. My hands started sweating and I shoved them in my pockets. Junior kept his hands out where anyone could see them. After 2 full blocks, the police car finally sped up and drove away. Zara squeezed Junior's shoulder once and then let go. Nobody said anything about what just happened. When we got back to Junior's house, Zara went straight to the kitchen and started making sandwiches. She asked us how school was going while she spread peanut butter on bread. Junior sat at the table and said Miss Steph ignored his hand yesterday for 5 whole minutes in math class. Zara's face didn't change at all. She just nodded and kept making the sandwiches like he'd told her the weather forecast. She asked if he got the answer right when she finally called on him. Junior said yes, and Zara set a sandwich in front of each of us. She looked at Junior and said, "Good, don't give them any excuses." Then she asked if I wanted juice or water. The whole thing felt so normal and so wrong at the same time. I thought about yesterday when that same officer talked to me at the basketball courts. He asked me questions like where I lived and if my parents knew where I was, but with Junior he just gave orders. Move along, go home, keep it down. Same cop, same situation, but completely different words depending on whose skin was darker. I finished my sandwich and checked the time on Zara's kitchen clock. It was almost 5. I told them I needed to get home before my dad completely lost it. Junior walked me to the door and said thanks for hanging out. Zara told me I was welcome back anytime. The walk home took 15 minutes and my phone buzzed the entire way with more angry messages. When I opened the front door, my dad was standing right there waiting. My aunt and uncle were in the living room. My cousin was on the stairs looking guilty again. My dad said I was grounded for 2 weeks starting right now. No phone except for emergencies. No going to Junior's house. No hanging out after school. If I disobeyed him one more time, he would send me to live with my grandmother in another state, and he wasn't joking. My aunt said the neighborhood association president called her personally. The president wanted to express concerns about our family and how we were fitting into the community. My uncle said I was making everything harder for everyone, and I needed to think about someone besides myself for once. I went to my room without arguing because what was the point? They weren't going to listen anyway. The weekend felt like it lasted a month. Monday morning, I walked into English class and sat in my usual seat near the back. Aiden came in a few minutes later, and instead of going to his assigned seat across the room, he sat down right next to me. The teacher looked up from her desk and noticed, but she didn't say anything about it. Aiden didn't talk to me during class. He just sat there taking notes like normal. When the bell rang, he grabbed his stuff and stood up to leave. He dropped a folded piece of paper on my desk as he walked past. I waited until he was gone to open it. The note just said, "You're not wrong," in blue pen. That was it. I shoved the paper in my pocket before anyone could see it. During library period, I went to the back section where they kept the old yearbooks. I pulled out books from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I was trying to understand how this town got like this and when it started. The librarian was an older white woman, and I'd never talked to her before. She noticed what I was reading and disappeared into the stacks for a minute. When she came back, she had 3 books in her arms. She set them on my table without saying a word. One was about colorism. One was about discrimination in small towns. One was about bias and how people learn it. Then she just walked away like she hadn't done anything at all. I checked the books out and put them in my backpack before anyone could see the titles. In science class, the teacher announced we were starting group projects on ecosystems. She said we could pick our own partners, and everyone immediately started pairing up. I looked around the room and watched people grab their friends. Ashley partnered with her best friend. 2 boys who sat in front started planning together. Within 30 seconds, everyone had a partner except me and Junior. The teacher looked at both of us and asked if we wanted to work together. The way she said it made it sound like she expected us to say no, like she was giving us an out. I said yes immediately before I could think about it too much. Junior looked at me for a second and then nodded. The entire classroom went completely silent. People stopped talking mid-sentence and stared at us. Ashley leaned over to her friend and whispered something. They both laughed and looked right at me while they did it. Miss Steph let out this big sigh like we'd just made her day so much harder. She said we would need to meet with her after class to discuss expectations and behavior. When the bell rang, everyone else rushed out, but Junior and I stayed in our seats. Miss Steph closed the door and told us our project needed to be appropriate. She said we should avoid controversial topics. Junior asked what counted as controversial. Miss Steph said anything that might make other students uncomfortable. I realized right then she was trying to control what we presented before we'd even started. She was already assuming we'd do something wrong. After she finally let us leave, I went to my locker to grab my stuff for next period. There was spray paint on the metal door. Someone had written something I didn't fully understand, but I knew it was meant to be insulting. The janitor was already there with cleaning supplies, scrubbing it off. He looked at me with this sad expression, but didn't say who did it or when it happened. I heard footsteps and looked up to see the principal walking down the hallway. He saw the janitor cleaning my locker. He saw me standing there. He just kept walking like nothing was happening at all. He didn't stop to ask questions. He didn't even slow down. He walked right past us and turned the corner and disappeared. The janitor kept scrubbing, and I stood there watching the words slowly fade away under his rag, wondering how many times he'd done this exact same thing before. The next day at the school, Mrs. Merritt pulled me out of second period and walked me to her office without saying a word. She closed the door and sat down across from me with this fake, concerned expression on her face. She said she was worried about my choices and specifically mentioned the science project with Junior. She suggested I might want to work alone instead, because group projects can be challenging when partners have different work ethics. I told her Junior was a great student and I wanted to work with him. Her smile got tighter and she pulled out a form and started writing while she talked. She said she was documenting our conversation for my file and would be monitoring my progress closely to make sure I was making good decisions. The way she said good decisions made it clear she meant staying away from Junior. When I got back to class, everyone stared at me like I'd just gotten in huge trouble. The next day in math class, Junior was sitting 2 rows ahead working on problems when the intercom crackled. The secretary's voice called Junior to the principal's office, and the entire class went silent. Junior packed up his stuff slowly and left without looking at anyone. Miss Steph kept teaching like nothing happened, but I couldn't focus on anything except watching the clock. 20 minutes passed before Junior came back and slid into his seat with a yellow paper in his hand. After class, I caught up to him in the hallway and asked what happened. He showed me the paper, and it was a written warning for disruptive behavior. I asked what he actually did, and he said another student was whispering slurs during group work, so he told them to stop. The other student didn't get called to the office at all and didn't get any kind of warning. During lunch, I went straight to the principal's office and asked the secretary if I could see the disciplinary report from this morning. She looked confused and went to get Mr. Campbell. He came out of his office looking annoyed and told me the report was confidential and none of my business. I said I was sitting right there in math class and Junior wasn't being disruptive at all. Mr. Campbell crossed his arms and said my version of events didn't match the teacher's report. He told me to get back to lunch and stop wasting his time on matters that didn't concern me. After school, I was walking to the parking lot when Aiden caught up to me. He didn't say anything but handed me a folded sticky note and kept walking before I could respond. I opened it and it said, "Keep receipts," in his handwriting with a little drawing of a phone camera underneath. I understood exactly what he meant. Junior and I met at the library after school to start planning our science project. We grabbed a table in the back corner where nobody usually sat. I suggested we do something about bias in everyday life and use math and statistics to show the patterns. Junior looked nervous and asked if that was a good idea given everything that was happening. I told him we could just present facts and numbers and let people draw their own conclusions. He thought about it for a minute, then nodded and said, "Okay." We decided to collect data about things like how long teachers wait to call on different students and how many times they get or ignored when their hands are raised. When I got home that night, I told my dad about our project idea at dinner. He stopped eating and got really quiet. He asked if I understood what I was doing and what it might cost me. I said yes, I understood. He put down his fork and said he was scared for me. That's when something clicked and I realized his anger this whole time had always been fear underneath. We didn't solve anything or agree on what I should do, but at least we were being honest with each other. Over the next week, I started documenting everything I could. I brought a stopwatch to class and timed how long teachers waited to call on Junior compared to other students. I took screenshots of social media posts where people were talking about me and saying nasty things. After school, I walked past Junior's house and photographed the police car that parked across the street every single evening. I filled up an entire notebook with dates and times and specific examples of things I witnessed. One day, Junior's mom, Zara, saw my notebook when I had it open at their kitchen table. She picked it up and flipped through a few pages, then nodded like she approved. But then she said, evidence doesn't always change minds, and I needed to be ready for people to ignore everything I showed them. On Wednesday, Miss Steph announced that project presentations would start next Monday, and we needed to be prepared. The second she said it, people started whispering and looking at me and Junior. By the end of the day, rumors were spreading about what we were planning to present. Ashley told her friends we were going to attack the school and make everyone look racist. That Friday morning, the principal made an announcement over the intercom about appropriate presentation content. He said all projects needed to maintain respectful discourse and avoid divisive topics that might make other students uncomfortable. He didn't say our names, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Monday morning arrived and I barely slept the night before. Miss Steph spent the first 5 minutes of class reviewing rules about respectful discourse and academic tone. She looked directly at me and Junior the entire time she talked. The other students were rolling their eyes and whispering to each other, already convinced our project would be some kind of confrontation before we even started. When it was finally our turn, Junior went first and pulled up our data on the projector. He showed statistics about classroom participation and disciplinary actions and teacher response times. His voice stayed steady and calm, and he stuck to pure numbers without adding any commentary. Then I took over and connected those numbers to specific examples we had observed, being careful to describe behavior without using anyone's names. A kid in the back row made a loud fake cough that sounded like he was saying something rude, but Miss Steph held up her hand without even looking at him. She told the class that interruptions during presentations would result in detention, and suddenly everyone got quiet. I could see her jaw was tight, and her fingers were tapping against her desk like she wanted to say something, but was forcing herself not to. The air felt thick and uncomfortable, and I noticed some students shifting in their seats and looking anywhere except at me and Junior. When Junior clicked to our final slide showing the pattern of different treatment based on skin tone, the room got even more tense. Miss Steph wrote something in her gradebook with more force than necessary, and I heard the pencil lead snap. Junior finished talking, and I added our conclusion about how small biases add up over time to create bigger problems. The second I stopped talking, there was complete silence for what felt like forever. Nobody moved or made a sound, and I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then Aiden raised his hand slowly, and Miss Steph looked surprised but called on him. He asked how we made sure our timing data was accurate and if we used the same stopwatch for everyone. Junior explained our method and how we cross-checked our numbers, and Aiden nodded like he was actually thinking about it. 2 other students were listening instead of whispering to each other or rolling their eyes, which was more than I expected. It wasn't a standing ovation or anything close to that, but it was something real. Miss Steph told us to sit down and called the next group to present about their topic on recycling programs. I pulled out my phone under my desk, and it was already vibrating non-stop with notifications. There were texts from people I barely knew calling me names and saying I was trying to start drama. Someone had already screenshot our slides and posted them with the caption, "Imagine making everything about race," and it had 30 likes in 5 minutes. Ashley posted on her story with a picture of herself rolling her eyes and the words, "Some people just want attention," with a side-eye emoji pointed right at the camera. I saved every single screenshot like Aiden had suggested weeks ago when this all started. By the time class ended, I had over 40 messages, and most of them were either mocking us or angry that we made people uncomfortable. Junior looked at his phone and shook his head, but didn't seem surprised at all. The next day, Mrs. Merritt called me down to her office during second period. She was sitting behind her desk with a folder open, and she had that fake concerned look that adults use when they're actually mad. She told me that several students had come to her feeling attacked by our presentation yesterday. I pulled out my phone and showed her the slides we used and asked which specific part attacked anyone. She scrolled through them slowly and couldn't point to anything but kept saying the tone was problematic. I asked what problematic meant exactly, and if she could give me an example. She said it was more about how we made other students feel, and that intent doesn't matter as much as impact. I asked if she was going to file a formal complaint with specific examples so we could address them. Her face got red and she said she would consider next steps and discuss it with the principal. She told me I was dismissed and I walked out knowing nothing had actually been resolved. That afternoon, I went to the library to work on homework and noticed Missy Poe had set up a new display near the entrance. It had books about critical thinking and media literacy and how to spot bias in everyday life. One book was about discrimination, and another was about evaluating information sources. She didn't say anything to me when I walked past, but she was arranging the display carefully, and I saw her glance at me once. A few students actually stopped to look at the books, and one girl checked out a book about bias. It wasn't a big gesture, but the timing wasn't random either. That weekend, Zara texted and invited me over for dinner on Saturday. When I got there, she had made chicken and rice, and Junior was setting the table. We ate and talked about normal stuff like movies and video games, and it felt good to just relax. After dinner, Zara asked Junior to go upstairs and finish his homework, and then she turned to me with a serious face. She thanked me for being Junior's friend and said it meant more than I probably understood. But then she made sure I knew that change in this town happens slowly, if it happens at all. She wasn't trying to discourage me, but she wanted me to be ready for a long fight with no quick wins. She said people's minds don't change just because you show them data or prove them wrong. Junior came back downstairs and he seemed lighter somehow, like having one real friend made the weight easier to carry. When I left that night, I felt good about what we were doing, even though I knew it was just the beginning. Sunday night, my dad knocked on my door and asked if we could talk. He sat down on my bed and was quiet for a minute before he started. He said fear made him react badly when I first became friends with Junior. He explained that he moved our family here thinking lighter skin would protect us from some of the harder parts of being black. Watching me reject that protection terrified him because he knew what I would face. We didn't agree on everything, and he still wished I had chosen an easier path, but he said he wouldn't punish me for having principles. He told me he was proud even though he was scared, and that counted for something. Monday morning, I checked my email before school and saw the principal had responded to Mrs. Merritt's complaint. He wrote that our presentation met academic standards and followed all the rules for the assignment. But then he added that divisive topics should be approached with sensitivity to all perspectives. It was a non-answer that changed nothing, but at least it acknowledged we didn't actually break any rules. In history class that day, a teacher I had never had before told everyone to pack up their stuff because she was rearranging the seating chart. She moved people around without explaining why, and when we all sat down, Junior ended up next to two students who didn't sign the petition against him. It was such a tiny change that nobody else probably even noticed it. But I remembered Zara telling me that change happens in small acts, and I wondered if she had talked to this teacher. Wednesday at lunch, I was sitting at my usual table eating alone when Aiden walked over and sat down without asking permission. He didn't say much and just opened his lunch and started eating like it was completely normal. I talked about the math homework and he nodded and made a few comments but mostly just listened. Ashley walked past our table with her friends and made a loud comment about the reject table and how pathetic we looked. Aiden didn't even look up from his food and kept eating like he hadn't heard anything. By the end of lunch, another student I recognized from English class had joined us and was asking Aiden about the history assignment. It was 3 people total, which wasn't exactly a full table, but it was better than eating alone. When the bell rang and we all got up to leave, I felt something shift, like maybe things were slowly starting to change, even if it was too small for most people to notice. After school that day, I took the long way home just so I could walk past Junior's house. The same police car sat parked across the street in the exact same spot it had been every single day since I moved here. Junior was in his driveway shooting hoops by himself, and when he saw me, he waved like it was completely normal to have a cop watching his every move. I waved back and kept walking while the officer sat in his car with his eyes on both of us. He didn't get out or say anything, just watched and probably wrote notes about who Junior was talking to. Junior made another basket and went back to practicing his free throws, like the surveillance was just part of his regular afternoon. I thought about stopping to play with him, but I didn't want to give the cop any reason to get out of his car. The whole thing felt so normal and so wrong at the same time. Like this was just how Junior's life worked, and he had learned to keep living anyway. On Saturday morning, I met Junior at the basketball courts where we first played catch. We both got there early and spent the first few minutes just looking around to see who was watching. An old woman was walking her dog on the far side of the park, and she stared at us for a solid minute before moving on. A car slowed down as it drove past, and the driver looked right at us before speeding up again. Junior bounced the ball a few times and asked if I still wanted to play. I said yes, and we started a game of one-on-one, keeping our voices down and making sure our hands stayed visible the whole time. Junior had taught me all these unspoken rules about how to act in public, so people couldn't say we were being threatening or loud or suspicious. We couldn't celebrate too much when we scored. We couldn't argue about fouls. We had to stay aware of every person who walked past and every car that slowed down. But we played anyway because the game mattered more than the fear. Junior was beating me by 8 points when a police car drove past slowly, and we both froze until it kept going. Then Junior passed me the ball and we kept playing like nothing had happened. That night, I sat in my room and wrote in my journal about everything that had happened since my family moved here. I counted the friends I had now and compared it to the friends I thought I was making in my first week. Ashley wasn't talking to me anymore. Most of my lunch table had abandoned me. My cousin barely looked at me in the hallways. But I had Junior and Aiden and that one kid from English class whose name I still didn't know, but who sat with us anyway. 3 real friends were better than 20 fake ones. I wrote about how the town hadn't changed at all and probably wouldn't change anytime soon. The same people still crossed the street when they saw Junior. The same police cars still parked outside his house. The same teachers still ignored his raised hand. But I had changed, and that was something I could control. I used to think I could fix this problem in a few weeks if I just showed people how wrong they were. Now I understood this was a long road with no clear end. I didn't know if things would ever get better for Junior, or if the surveillance would ever stop, or if people would ever treat him like he was just a regular kid. But at least I knew what I was walking toward and who I was walking with. I closed my journal and got ready for another week of the same fights and the same small victories that nobody else seemed to notice. That's the end of this one, and I'm so glad you were here for it. Stories feel a little more magical when they're shared. I hope you leave with a lighter heart. Subscribe if you'd like to keep sharing these little joys with me.